All right. Okay, let's go ahead and get started then. We want to make sure we're respectful of everybody's time. We really appreciate you joining us today. My name is Tim Sawinski. I am the Communications Director for the Sierra Club Virginia chapter. I'll also be your MC for this very informative, very exciting webinar that we have planned for you all today. This is presented by the Sierra Club Virginia chapter staff. In my opinion, the best in the business in terms of advocacy on, problems with climate, the intersection of climate policy, environmental justice, etc. Today, we're going to be hearing from our intrepid speakers, Eileen Wool, who is, of course, our Offshore Energy Program Director, and Lynn Godfrey, our Just Transition Program Manager. Both people I have the distinct pleasure of working with as the Sierra Club tries to make a more equitable, fair, and prosperous Virginia, and also a livable one, which I think is on top of everybody's list. So today, I'm going to be continuing to letting people in as we talk, but I just want to kind of frame the conversation on what you're going to be hearing for this. But before I do that, we aren't having people unmute for this webinar. We ask that if you have questions, you don't have to wait till the end. You don't have to wait so we can unmute folks, because we're not going to be doing that for this one. Just go ahead and pop it into the chat, which you can find on the bottom toolbar of your Zoom on your Zoom toolbar at the bottom. If you just click chat, you can send a message. You can send one directly to me, or you can send one to the whole group. I'll be capturing those throughout, and we will be taking and answering questions at the end. But if there's something that's like really urgent, I will go ahead and respond to those. And again, our speakers may have more to add to that. So that's just some housekeeping items. Let's go ahead and just talk about, what we're going to be talking about right now. As you know, that the name of this webinar is aptly named Turn, Not Burn. It's a very concise, but also powerful way to think about the climate moment that we're in right now. Obviously, you have burn. We're referring, of course, to the burning of fossil fuels, the combustion that takes place that releases pollution that is, of course, going to stop us from having a livable future as it accelerates the climate problem, climate change. But thinking about burn is not just the idea of like fossil fuels in a scientific sense, the emissions that they create, but also how they impact and harm communities, how they impact our economy, how they hurt people's lives and livelihoods in the present. We cannot think about the climate problem as a long-term issue. We have to be thinking about it in the urgency that it deserves. And yes, we're talking about climate. Yes, we're talking about demonstrable, irreversible harm that will make it hard for civilization to exist. But we also have to think about how this is light a fire in people's lives right now. There are people who live near fossil fuel plants who are sicker than the people who don't live near fossil fuel plants. And those communities, generally speaking, often more times than not, a predictor of if you're going to get sick by a fossil fuel plant comes down to race, it comes down to class, it comes down to income, it comes down to a lot of factors that really demonstrate and showcase the concept of justice. So when we're thinking about the burn, we're not just talking about burning of fossil fuels. We're thinking about the burn of how it's a scourge on people's lives, livelihoods, and now it's a blight in our society. And on the other side of that, we have turn. And of course, we can think of this in the sense of the turning of an offshore wind blade, which is, of course, a climate solution. The idea that like this is a renewable energy. It is the process of when we get there, but it's also in the sense of we have to turn the page on our addiction and our dependency on fossil fuels into something that is not just good for the environment, but also healthy and beneficial to our communities. To get rid of the social justice and environmental justice issues that are prevalent, the racial justice issues that are prevalent. How can we use renewable energy in the sense that's not just a climate solution, but also a community solution? Now, how can we harness clean energy in a way that's not just about securing a livable future, but also empowering people's lives who haven't gotten a fair shake in life for a lot of the reasons that we have a fossil fuel economy? So that's what we want to talk about today, is kind of that intersection of climate, the environment, communities, justice. And this webinar is actually part of a series. This is part one of a 3-part series where we're going to have the theme of turn, not burn as a concept, as an idea, as a promise, as a goal for the Commonwealth. And This one is going to be a little bit of the 1,000-foot view. You're going to be hearing a lot about on the burn side of like what fossil fuel projects are proposed in Virginia, how much harm and chaos they are causing in certain communities, but also how to think about those things and how decisions are made. And we're also going to be talking about offshore wind as a promise, as the potential of unlocking energy that has multifaceted benefits across the country, so across our state. Every region of the Commonwealth is impacted by these issues. There is no corner of Virginia that is not impacted by fossil fuels and that can't benefit from a clean energy build out. That's what we're trying to capture in this conversation. That is what we're trying to present. So today it's going to be kind of a general overview. At the end, we're going to have signups for our next one, which is going to be talking about the economic impacts of that. And in December, we're going to be having another webinar that really boils down on the justice elements. Look, we can talk about the environment in an abstract scientific way all we want, but there's also a moral obligation to do something about this. So I don't want to get too far into those things because one, I'll rant too long and my coworkers are probably tired of doing that. But two, we need to get this show on the road. So like I said, today we are gonna have this great conversation from these two amazing, wonderful advocates who have been working on this for a long time. There's nobody I think who is more qualified to speak in this issue generally or in more specific terms than Lynn Godfrey and Eileen Wool. So we'll go ahead and get started with Lynn Godfrey. As I mentioned, she's our Just Transition Program Manager, and she's going to be starting the burn side. So actually, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for the presentation to follow around to. And all right, Lynn, can you see it?
Yes, I can see that. Thanks.
Right.
Thanks.
So you go ahead and take it
Thanks
away.
for asking. Yes.
Of course.
Oh, thank you very much, Tim, for that very, very enthusiastic and very generous introduction to the staff, myself, as well as to this presentation or this series that we're embarking on. As Tim stated, I'm Lynn Godfrey. I'm the Just Transition Program Manager, as well as the pipeline organizer for the Sierra Club Virginia chapter. And I want to thank you and welcome you to this webinar and hope that you do learn something today this is not just academic. The next slide, please, Tim. This is not just academic. This is really a serious business that we're in as a nation, as a state. We're in dire need of advocacy for turning, because we are burning up. And this webinar couldn't be even more appropriate than today, as Florida is buckling down and folks are leaving the areas that they're going to be impacted by a potential Category 4 or 5 hurricane for the second time in as many weeks, in 2 weeks. So if that's not mind-boggling right there within itself, I don't know what would be. So the fossil fuel development in Virginia, right now we're looking at 8 fossil fuel infrastructure developments in Virginia. Yes, 8. And I don't think most people are aware of that. We're aware of some of the big ones that's been around for a long time, and probably are not aware of some of the smaller ones, because what we have here is what we call segmented pipeline development. So you have a lot of segmented pipelines, but if you put them in the aggregate, they all is just one build out, primarily from Williams Transco, the MVP, as well as the Columbia Gas Transmissions, LLC. So the 8 fossil fuel developments in Virginia are the VRP, and that's the Virginia Reliability. The advocacies, we have renamed that to the Ripoff Project, the Virginia Ripoff Project, and that's a TC Energy / Columbia Gas Transmission LLC project. Then you have the CEC, which a lot of folks don't know, probably never heard of, and that's called the Commonwealth Energy Connector, and that is a Williams Transco development. So think of that as, if you look at Virginia, and you look at the southern central part of Virginia, so that's where the connector is, and is appropriately named because it is the connection between the newer pipelines, the VRP, getting that pipeline development completed, as well as to the west of there, going all the way back to Pittsylvania County. So these are connected, segmented projects that are all, if one fall, they all fall down. It's like domino effects. So then you have the VEP, which is the Virginia Electrification Project. And that's not correct. That it's got Transco up there. I'm sorry. That's not Transco. That is a Columbia Gas Transmission project also. And what that does is it has electrified compressor stations up in Boswell County and Goochland, all the way down to Petersburg. So it has upgraded all of those compressor stations from the northern central part of the state all the way down to Petersburg. So it's kind of what it is doing, what the CEC is doing for making the connections between the compressor stations from the west of Hampton Roads. This is making the compressor stations ready from the north of Richmond down to Petersburg. Then you have the Soft Side Enhancement Reliability Project. That is a Transco project. That project is out in Mecklenburg County, out in that way in the central western part of the state, Charles City, in that area. And that is a project that is also going to North Carolina, as well as connecting part of Mecklenburg County with I can't think of the name of the county. It's out in the western part of Suffolk, just Suffolk, so Emporia, in the Emporia, Mecklenburg. So they're making that connection. That's the South Side Enhancement Reliability Project. That project is waiting for the compressor station in Pittsburgh to be connected, because that compressor station is going to be sending gas to the South Side and eventually to the C, connect with the CEC. Then you have the Southeast Supply Enhancement Project, and that's a Transco project, and that's a very large project that just started with the pre-application with FERC. And that project is starting in Pennsylvania County and is going all the way down to Alabama. So that's a very large project. I think it's going to traverse over 900 miles. And that is starting in Pennsylvania County. Then you have the Mountain Valley Pipeline Saltgate, which is still, if you remember, try to get a air permit in Pennsylvania County about 3 years ago, and that was denied. And we thought they were not going to pursue that, but now they are. They're going to hitch a ride on one of the connectors from Transco. And then you have the Chesterfield gas plant, and that's a Dominion Energy development from an old coal burn gas plant, coal burn gas plant, and they want to make it into a gas plant in Chesterfield County. And then you have the T15. I believe that's the correct name, but that is in Tennessee. It's coming up from Tennessee, and it's going to impact the very tip of the western part of the state. And that I'm not sure who the owner of that is. I just learned about that one really a couple of weeks ago, because I was saying there were seven developments, and someone said no, there is actually 8. So there you have it. I mean, in the midst of, it's really amazing, you know, in the midst of a climate crisis, that we're looking at 8 fossil fuel infrastructure developments in the Commonwealth. Next slide, please. So we look at these, we oppose these in the advocacy against these pipelines on the 3-pronged lens of need, necessity, climate change, and environmental justice. Necessity, you ask the question, is this build out needed? Is it necessary? Is it for the public interest? These are questions that the regulatory agencies that's permitting these projects should be answering. Climate change, what is the proposed project's impact on climate change and the resulting crisis? Unfortunately, right now, FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, is not assessing greenhouse gas emissions, claiming they don't have the skill set to do so. And so we'll talk a little bit about that later. There is some cases that we have won under the Fifth Circuit, DC Fifth Circuit, that is promising. There were 3 cases this summer that the court did send back to FERC based on necessity, climate change, and environmental justice. So that was promising. And then we have environmental justice. How would the proposed fossil fuel build out impact EJ communities? Next slide, please. Is more fossil fuel development necessary? So we want to look at, looking at the Virginia Reliability Project, that is a project that is with Columbia Gas Transmission LLC. So the stated need that they provided on their FERC application was, and this is, I'm paraphrasing it, but it's really that simple, to address the future estimated energy needs of Southeast Virginia, and they specifically focus on Hampton Roads. We would look at that in the light of a climate crisis and in the light of environmental justice and try to justify, is this really a project that needs to be built? Is this project offering something that the public really need in light of the other risks that it will be taking, the environmental impact risk, as well as the contribution that it will make to the climate crisis? Then we're like, is there a clean energy alternative? Was there a clean energy alternative to the Virginia Reliability Project? Because in my mind, if there was ever a project that should not have been granted, it is this one. It's not that they're going to be providing infrastructure that's for a rural area that's needed for energy, or maybe to build a hospital somewhere where there's really a public need. This is for future estimated commercial need as well as residential need. They estimate 500,000 houses that this would be able to accommodate energy for. So these are things, you want to look at. Is that reasonable? I mean, is that necessity? Is that a reasonable necessity in light of a climate crisis? I mean, so those are the things that we're asking these regulatory agencies to look at and to really assess whether or not what doesn't make any sense. Then we have the clean energy alternative. So offshore wind, which Eileen would go into in more depth, coastal Virginia offshore wind projects estimated to deliver over 9 gigawatts of energy to an estimated 2.3 million homes. So that is going to come in service soon, in the next 10 years for sure. Eileen can tell you exactly what that time would be. Time frame is for that to come on service. So you look at these things and then you look at supply and demand. So, and through the lens of price, consumption, and production. Next slide, please. So, the United States Energy Information and Administration estimates that in the annual energy outlook for 2023, that as of January 1st, 2021, there were about 2,973 trillion cubic feet of technically recoverable resources of dry natural gas in the United States. Assuming the same annual rate of U.S. dry natural gas production in 2021 of about 34.52 trigger cubic feet, the United States has enough dry natural gas to last about 86 years. So, because often what is touted is that there is, a supply shortage. Also, Mothers Out Front did a study that we can provide in the chat. I'll give it to Tim when I finish this. They provided that in the chat that they did a study for gas supply in the southeastern part of Virginia, and where there was a shortage, and they found that there is not a shorter supply of gas, But if we're looking at energy needs for future, then surely we should be looking at alternatives that's not going to impact the environment, like the emissions of gas and oil production will do. So we're looking at price, and so the price of gas has declined throughout much of 2023 amid record U.S. natural gas production, flat natural gas consumption, and relatively high natural gas inventories. A mild winter rounded out 2023, leading to even lower prices in early 2024, and that is from the EIA, the Energy Information Administration. So the average monthly wholesale spot natural gas price at the U.S. benchmark Henry Hub fell by 20% to $2.56 56 cents per million British thermal between January and June of this year. So the prices has dropped tremendously. And the reason why it has dropped tremendously because the consumption is flat and the inventory is pretty high. So, I mean, we can say, so, I mean, looking at it from price, you know, I don't think that we need to produce, I mean, any more, I mean, price right there is low because of the other conditions of the consumption and the supply. Next screen, please, Tim. And consumption and demand is pretty, I gotta kind of rush because I'm going over time. But anyway, you see this, the total consumption, that's the blue line, and the total supply. So other than like the early part where consumption went really high when it was real cold, I think it was December 20, the last 2023, but it was only for like a week or so. But you can see where that total supply is steady and has been above what the demand or the consumption has been. So it debunks the myth that we have a supply shortage of gas, is what the point is. Another reason why, you know, that FERC and the SEC in the state of Virginia, these are the things that they should be looking at to determine, you know, whether or not necessity. Because one of the court cases with the Fifth Circuit did find that really FERC had not adequately determined that a project really was needed. Next slide, please. And that was in this summer that was determined. This is also a supply and production, working gas and underground storage compared with the 5-year maximum and minimum. So this gives you a good idea of what, working gas and storage was 3447 BCFs as of Friday, September 27th, 2024. And that's according to EIA estimates. This represents a net increase of 55 BCF from the previous week. Stocks were 127 BCF higher than last year as at this time, and 190 BCF above the 5-year average of the 35.5 BCF at 35.47 BCF. Total working gases within the 5-year historical range. So, you know, the supply and production is within that 5-year range. It has not, nothing has triggered it to one or the other to go way out of whack, where we haven't, for this build out that we're looking at, and this is just in the state of Virginia. So this build out is increasing in volumes all over the country. Virginia is, is for the data centers primarily. Different warehouses, they want to see that build out. So this is some of the things that's driving this increase in supply demand for the industry, profit primarily. Next slide, please. So the next thing we want to look at is through the lens of climate change. So, greenhouse gas emissions are the main man-made cause of rising global temperatures, posing a threat to maintaining a life-sustaining atmospheric temperature. It's just that simple. I mean, burning of fossil fuels is the primary cause of increase of the atmospheric change. The carbon dioxide and methane traps heat. It's just that simple. It traps heat, and it does it, and it keeps us at a temperature, that's livable. We do want it to trap heat, but too much of it is trapping too much heat, and it's causing the Earth's atmosphere to warm up. And we're getting, these type of adverse weather conditions like we're seeing in Florida with these type of hurricanes. In 2 weeks, to get this 2 major hurricanes that they have not seen in 100 years is amazing. And so we're going to see these things more frequently because we're not maintaining what scientists say we need to maintain to maintain a livable temperature on Earth, and that's maintaining Earth's temperature at 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is about 57 degrees Fahrenheit, which would, if we weren't emitting all of this carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere, that's kind of what would be happening anyway. So without reduction in the Earth's atmospheric temperature from fossil fuel production, the current climate crisis seen through extreme weather events like floods, fires, droughts, and heat waves will remain the greatest threat to the planet. And that is not hyperbole, that is the truth. We're looking at it. I mean, it's very scary, very, very scary what's happening in Florida. That hurricane is supposed to land, I think, tonight or tomorrow. And only God knows what it's gonna leave behind. But so reducing every ton of greenhouse gases helps to cut climate pollution. The window of opportunity to secure a sustainable future is rapidly closing, according to an IPCC scientist in the March 2023 climate change report. And that's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the United Nations Intergovernment Panel on Climate change. And they have already did a red alert earlier this year, a red alert that 2023 was the hottest year on earth, and 2024 seems to be following suit to be even hotter. And so they've warned us. So this dire warning only underscores the immediate need to transition from fossil fuels to renewables at the same alarming rate as the climate crisis threat presents. So a lot of times people, we have time. We don't have time. We really, really do not have time. We're behind time, way, way behind time. The scientists are yelling and screaming. It's like, Noah doing the ark, and it really is. The flood is coming, and nobody's paying attention. And we're looking at this general election year to see whether or not we are going to ban fracking or not. So I think keeping these things in mind, I think what's happening in Florida and how in that first hurricane, how other states were impacted, I think that conversation may be shifting a little for the better. The next slide, please. And what is fossil fuels' contribution to climate change and crisis? So we already said that. This is just a picture from Asheville, North Carolina. This is, might be coming to a neighborhood near you soon. So take heed. Next slide, please. And fossil fuels development, environmental justice. Fossil fuel, not only does it contribute to climate change, but it also contributes to certain populations of people in Virginia. That's primarily Black people and indigenous people, but primarily Black people, have disproportionate burdens from the results of the climate crisis and from the results of environmental pollution. So beyond employment concerns, many of these communities experience worse health outcomes due to these operations exacerbating existing health disparities. Shockingly, and this came out not long ago, 2,000 children under 5 die every day from air pollution, and over 8 million deaths of children and adults were attributed to air pollution in 2021. And that is from the State of the Global Air Report. And I can put that link also in the chat for you. Next slide, please. Health impacts, environmental pollution, and fencing frontline communities. These are communities that's mostly impacted by environmental pollution and the burning of fossil fuels and operations, whether it's in the Gulf and in Texas and Louisiana, where you have Cancer Alley, or whether or not it's in Portsmouth, where you have communities that is surrounded by 4 active Superfund sites. More than 1 million African Americans live within a half mile of a natural gas facilities. That's true here in Virginia. Pennsylvania County and Petersburg are 2 environmental justice communities living within a half mile of natural gas facilities. Over 1 million African Americans face a cancer risk above EPA's level of concern due to unclean air. Petersburg air pollution daily density average of particulate matter 2.5 is higher than the states and the nations, and the toxic release in the air is in the 93rd percentile for the state. And that is from the EPA EJ screen within a 3-mile radius of the compressor station that is being upgraded there. More than 6.7 million African Americans live in 91 U.S. counties with oil refineries. And that's because the reason that is because most African Americans live in the southern part of the United States, were, as a result of this Atlantic slave trade. So that is where most of African Americans are in the place they are in the United States, and consequently more impacted by environmental pollution from oil and gas, as well as from climate change, hurricanes, and the like. In total, African Americans are 75% more likely than white people to live in fence line communities. Fence line communities are communities within 1, 2, 3, some people say 5, some people go as far as 10, but 3 miles is I think what the EPA kind of is what the practitioners of environmental justice kind of lay your hat at most. And so that is what is considered a fence line community. Next slide, please. So some of the solution is that we can, we have one thing with Virginia, we have a history of fighting pipelines. We have a history of winning fights against pipelines, and would have won the one against the Mountain Valley Pipeline had not, it took an act of Congress for them to that, literally an act of Congress for them to go in service. So that injustice is still continuing. But some of the solution is promote policies for clean energy, the Virginia Clean Economy Act. I mean, why would you give, that act calls for zero emissions by 2050 and the closing of gas plants, I forget which year, 2045, 2050. But why would you approve fossil fuel infrastructure to put it back in service for another 20 years? If the doctor tell you, if you don't stop eating fried chicken, you're going to be dead in 5 years. Well, you can't wait to the 5th year to stop eating it. I mean, so promote policies for clean energy jobs. And that's one of the series that we're going to talk more about. Promote policies for polluters to pay. That is what Reggie did. Promote policies for environmental protection, regulations, and monitoring. And here we have the Virginia EJ Act that needs to be strengthened and laid for before, the responsible agencies. Next slide, please. And that's it. So if you have any questions, put them in the chat, and we will get to it at the end of the program during questioning and answering. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Lynn. And I am just a quick note to the audience. I am logging your questions, so please keep them coming. We're going to get to them at the end. So thank you. And they've been good questions so far. So now we're going to go ahead and transition to Eileen Wohl, who's going to talk about the merits of offshore wind and the potential that it can unlock across the board in Virginia.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Lynn. I'm Eileen Wohl. I'm the Offshore Energy Program Director with the Sierra Club Virginia chapter. And as Lynn so aptly outlined, the climate crisis really demands rapid development of renewable energy and resources. And luckily for us, offshore wind has the potential to deliver upwards of 30%. It's a massive amount, 30% of Virginia's 100% clean energy goal. And we must also ensure that this offshore wind is done right, however, meaning that it is brought online in a way that is fair, equitable, and beneficial to all Virginians. Next slide. I want to quickly go over some of the potential for offshore wind that exists right now. It is a tremendous resource for us. As the map on the right-hand side shows, we have a tremendous amount of resource off our coast. We also have shallow waters going out 50 miles off our coast, which allows us to plant these wind turbines directly into the ocean bottom, the floor. After 50 miles, it drops off dramatically, and we're talking about having to do potentially floating wind turbines. But we do have a very large outer continental shelf that is shallow and perfect. We're also, obviously along the Atlantic coast, we have a lot of energy demand. That's the map on the left depicts so a nighttime sky, so you can see the amount of electricity burning on the East Coast, which the offshore resource can go directly to that, as opposed to any of the power lines that need to come from the Midwest. of servicing the East Coast. So it also is a very steady, and it's offshore wind is also very complementary to solar. Offshore wind is most strongest in the wintertime months, and it's also most strongest at night. And those are 2 times, obviously, when the sun is not shining as brightly or as intensely. Next slide. There's been also a lot of technological and environmental impacts mitigations that have been proven and are manageable, and a lot of projects going on up and down the East Coast because of all the technology and the environmental impacts that have been manageable and proven to be existent, and also driven very largely by the economic benefits. The Biden administration has a goal of 30 gigawatts by 2030, which I think will be very easily met. And that is calculated to result in as many as 83,000 jobs and over 100 billion in investment. Next slide, please. And offshore wind is a mature industry in other countries, especially in Europe and in Asia. The United States is a little late to the party, but we are otherwise going gangbusters. Very excited about this frontier in energy, this frontier industry for the United States. Next slide. Some of the advantages that Virginia in particular has, we have a deep water port. We also have world-class shipbuilding and maritime industries. We do not have the overhead restrictions going into our ports. We don't have the bridges and tunnels that go over. I mean, we have a bridge tunnel system that allows these large ships because the parts that support offshore wind are massive. So not having any of these overhead barriers is very conducive for Virginia becoming a major East Coast hub for offshore wind and a national offshore wind leader. I'd love to mention that any offshore wind wind turbine is made up of about 8,000 parts. That translates to a lot of manufacturing of not only tiny parts, but very, very large parts. These turbine blades are larger than football fields. So, and the turbines that Dominion is building off the Virginia coast are taller than the Eiffel Tower. So we are talking about massive, not only plentiful with 8,000 parts, but also massive as well. So this is something that, translates to a lot of jobs, like I said, and also there is all the associated industries with this. This is the building of specialized vessels, the installation vessels, as well as the jobs involved with shoring our ports to handle all this huge industry, the turbine maintenance and the construction. So, I mean, the list of jobs and industry involved with this is just goes on and on and on. Next slide. Just a quick picture of some of the CVOW project, just to show you just how enormously large these things are. Just to note also that full build out of this entire industry is estimated to create as many as 14,000 jobs in Virginia. And these are high-paying local long-term jobs that can employ lots of Virginians, including high school and college grads, returning citizens, and veterans who are transitioning to the civilian workforce. Next slide. And most importantly, especially in the context of what we're talking about here, is that offshore wind allows us to avoid as much as 17 million tons of carbon emissions and will eliminate the need to build any new dirty gas plants or reduce or replace any of the fossil fuel infrastructure that Lynn talked about. But to secure for Virginia to secure this economic investment and the jobs associated with offshore wind, we really need to have a vision and goals and policies to establish and promote a strong and steady pipeline of wind projects to ensure its responsible development. Next slide. And then just quickly on the policy and what the environment is right now for offshore wind. As Lynn mentioned, we do have the Virginia Clean Economy Act, which put into the public interest 5,200 megawatts of offshore wind as our goal. That we have recently had the Inflation Reduction Act, which was very helpful to offshore wind. Specifically, there's some tax investments, tax credits that are built in to it and are helpful to offshore wind, amongst many other things that are built into the IRA. We have state goals. We also have the Biden administration's, like I said, there are 30 gigawatts by 2030 goal. And they have, the Biden administration is really inspired the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, which is under the Department of Interior, to be very aggressive on leasing. There has been and very equitable on leasing. A lot of these leases that have been happening recently have been done with an enormous amount of consideration for all the community impacts of offshore wind. They are including not only there's additional credits for domestic content, for instance, having developers being able to get credit for purchasing and using domestically created content, which will help drive that, and also siting of projects in energy communities and pulling from the communities that live in those energy communities, and also for fisheries mitigation, for workforce development, and for supply chain. So lots and lots of incentives, along with just plain developing the land, developing the offshore areas that are really supporting an equitable development of offshore wind. Next slide. As you can see, these are, a lot of the development is also being driven by goals. That various states have various goals, and a lot of them are very aggressive. New York in particular, there's you can see, especially some states that don't necessarily have as much real estate off their coast have still yet a fairly aggressive. Virginia, like I said, has that 5.2 gigawatts, but we want to increase that. The potential is there, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But that is pretty piddly considering the amount of area and the amount of projects we have going on. Next slide, please. So yeah, there's a lot more leasing that's going to be happening. We had a couple weeks ago, we had the sale of another area adjacent that Dominion purchased. So Dominion has 2 projects off the coast. Previous lease sales have also netted the area off Kitty Hawk, which will be coming online. And then we're going to have another lease sale coming up in the Central Atlantic, which I think will occur next year as well. So next slide. So this is just really the whole potential that we have right now. We have already on the books having construction operations started on the Coastal Virginia Offshore Wind Project. That's a Dominion project that is going to deliver 2.6 gigawatts of power, gigawatts of power. Get my megawatts and gigawatts confused sometimes, sorry. 2.6 gigawatts of power by the end of 2026. They have, I think they have completed like 8 to 10. It's 126 turbines total. And each machine is 14.5 gigawatts of power. It's about 27 miles off our coast. We've been working on this project since 2009. So yeah, it's very exciting to see that one come along. The Kitty Hawk project, it was won at auction by Avangrid Renewables. That will come online and come into the grid via Virginia. It'll come into Virginia Beach. This one is about 3,000 gigawatts. Dominion recently bought the the northern half of the northern 1/3, I should say, of the Kitty Hawk project. So they're calling it CVAL South. And then, like I said, with BOEM having additional lease sales, that's the map on the right, showing the area in red off Virginia's coast is the new development that Dominion just bought. That will definitely, I mean, it's a little larger than the current CVAL area, so that one is, you know, I think we're guessing around 3 gigawatts of power. There could be next year additional sales we'll be lobbying for adjacent to the Kitty Hawk area and what's labeled call area D. So we're really excited about a lot of this, of these projects and the potential of really maximizing the amount of offshore wind that's coming online in Virginia and reinforcing Virginia as, you know, a powerhouse for offshore wind, having these projects lined up. So yeah, so it's making us especially with potentially those 3 or 4 projects off our coast, is making our 5.2 gigawatts of offshore wind seem pretty piddly. So we really, to maximize the amount of economic development and job creation benefits, and to ensure its equitable development, and then also to just, most importantly, quickly meet our 100% clean energy goals. We must have it as a state goal, state mandate, that we have at least 8 gigawatts of offshore wind in declared in the public interest, and as our goal that we want to establish policies to support. Yeah, the 8 gigawatts of clean energy is potentially powering over 2.3 million homes, and that avoids approximately 17 million tons of carbon emissions, which is equivalent to 4 million gas-powered cars and 45 gas plants that are not built, expanded, or otherwise shut down. And next slide. Oh, you got it. Yeah, we always have to take a step back with offshore wind a little bit, because a lot of misinformation that's been floating around, and then also just to relate some of the public sentiment on offshore wind. It's been in Virginia, we've been working on this, like I said, for many, many, many years. Actually, I started working on offshore wind in 2009, and really got in front of it as far as just making sure the correct information was getting out there, and we were galvanizing support amongst grassroots, and then really putting a lot of pressure on Dominion for a number of years, putting pressure on elected officials, our governors, to move offshore wind along, putting pressure on the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management to move these things along, and also expand its horizons for offshore wind. So we've been working on this for a really long time, and we're very thankful to have a good base of support. We do have over 50% of folks that were surveyed. We worked with the Energy Foundation to do a survey, and found that there was another survey that had it 56%. So I want to go with 56%. It's a better number, but more than half support offshore wind. And there are people who are opponents, and I would say that they might be spurred by some of the misinformation that's going on, but we have a persuasion audience of 19%, which are people that are don't know enough to make a decision one way or another, or they're on the fence. So coming and reaching out to them with our arguments for offshore wind, with the jobs, the confronting climate crisis, we hope to win them over. Next slide. Yeah, so we have, just to wrap things up, we have just the capacities of, just an enormous amount of clean energy that we can bring online. 8 gigawatts is nothing to sneeze at. I mean, this is something that is a game changer. especially with the amount of jobs that it also creates, and how we can be an industry leader in Virginia for this new exciting industry. And it's something that there's generally support for. I mean, sure, we could use some more support, but it is a winning message, about the economic benefits and its reliability, and it's adding to the security, and then confronting climate. Arguably, the major winning element of offshore wind is that it allows us, bringing it online, allows us to replace fossil fuels and shut down these all these projects that are plaguing us in Virginia right now. That is it. Yeah, happy to entertain any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen. Great overview of everything. This next slide is essentially, how you can take action for the next steps. I think there was some compelling reasons to support the work that we're doing at the Sierra Club. And also, there's only so much that a few advocates on staff can do. At the end of the day, what's going to matter in the political realm, the policy realm, and the social realm is people showing support for transitioning off of fossil fuels and embracing things like offshore wind. So that's what these QR codes, if you want to scan them, kind of do. I'll go quickly over what they are, but I want to get to questions. So one is you can contact the Biden administration in relation to essentially taking further steps to protect and decrease our dependency on natural gas through liquefied natural gas exports. Lynn can talk more about that. I don't want to confuse anyone by talking about it. The next one is we can tell Congress to vote against bills that essentially help fast track natural gas fossil fuel infrastructure projects. And the last one, of course, on the state level is encouraging support for our local lawmakers, our state lawmakers, to do exactly what Eileen was just talking about, building offshore wind, not just in a way that gets it off the ground, but also in a fair and equitable way that maximizes its potential, both for our climate, our environment, and our communities. And the first one, of course, is this was just a big preview. There's a lot more to discuss about the idea of turn, not burn, why we need to get off fossil fuels, why we need to embrace clean energy. And we're going to talk about the economic benefits of doing so on our next webinar in November. So you can sign up for that with that QR code too. So that was a quick overview. You can also, if you scan them, you'll see more about what those action alerts are about. But now I want to move to the questions. And I like the first question that we received in the chat. And it's almost I think it's a practical question, but also a philosophical one, maybe in a way. It's how can one choose between warming one's home and the problem of climate change? I think there's, some, I think both of you could probably take this, but I think this is just a question of practicality in sense of, is there technology to do both? And the short answer to that is yes. But Lynn, Eileen, whoever wants to answer that in your way, please let me know, or please go ahead.
Well, I'm not really sure what they're asking. I mean, how does one do what now?
It's phrased, how can one choose between warming one's home and the problem of climate change? I think
well, the problem of climate change exists, and warming is just some of the social determinants that disproportionately place people that are living in poverty, how they are resilient against certain things. So energy burden is an issue. That means you're spending more than 6% of your monthly income on your utility, on your energy bill, whether that's gas, oil, or electricity, however you're getting your energy. So I don't think it's a conscious thought that most people think of, climate change. You can fight and advocate against climate change and be poor and maybe have issues paying your energy bill, but there are resources for paying your energy bill. That's what some of the things that the RGGI funds went for, was energy burden, flooding, and and weatherization. So that was one of the things that they did provide for, is helping folks to pay those type of bills, or to retrofit your house so that if it is your house, to so that it would be energy efficient and you won't be losing energy.
Yeah, great answer. And this actually kind of moves into the second question that was asked, which is absolutely relatable because, you know, we don't just have to power our homes with fossil fuel. Excuse me, power them or heat our homes with fossil fuel. Heat pumps is a way to take the fossil fuel out in terms of a warming method of using, you know, electricity essentially as the energy source. And so one person actually made the point that they tried to do exactly what you were saying, Lynn, retrofit their house, get rid of the gas furnace and put in a heat pump. One of the ways to just getting rid of fossil fuel connection into your house. But they had contractors essentially try to dissuade them from doing it, saying things like, it's not going to warm your house up enough in the cold, you know, as one example. And then so the question that they posed was, how do we educate contractors on the merits of these clean energy alternatives like a heat pump?
Yeah, I have a heat pump. You know, to be honest, you know, the system doesn't last as long. I think it's around 10 years that the systems last. You do, if it's really, really cold, there is a increase in the furnace being run or the pump running more, you know, so that issue does exist to some degree. My energy bill is not that high. You know, I don't know of any contractors building houses today that's not putting in heat pumps. So I'm not aware of that. I think that's the go-to standard right now, far as heating and cooling is heat pumps, as far as I know. I don't know anybody putting in anything in a new home anyway. But if you're retrofitting, yeah, I mean, that's what, you know, it has been proven to be more energy efficient. And so.
Yeah, I'll add on to that heat pumps in most of the United States have proven to be 3 to 5 times as energy efficient as a gas powered furnace. So, I mean, that's a huge impact on your electric bill. And also there's a good point to make is that, like, you know, natural gas power plants, they don't work as well in the cold. If you remember what happened in Texas when they had that terrible polar vortex a few years ago, a large reason, if not one of the most compelling reasons that it was there, was that the natural gas plants did not operate in freezing cold temperatures. Parts of the natural gas plants that are necessary literally froze and they could not turn on. So this is a misnomer I think is worth dispelling, that like clean energy alternatives like solar or like wind don't work as efficiently or as well as natural gas plants, which is where, you know, we're moved beyond mostly coal. We're not building many new coal plants, if any, but fossil fuel industry is trying to build more natural gas. And the problem is they're not dependable in extreme weather events. And this is compounded with climate change because we have more extreme weather events. And so the fact that we're building things that don't necessarily operate as well as they should in extreme times when we're going to need the heat the most, when we're going to need the cooling the most, is really telling of how much of a bad investment it is into not just for ratepayers, people who pay their electric bills, but also for our communities just to be able to survive and thrive in extreme weather events. I will say in that same vein, solar during that cold snap worked as expected. So that's just a good thing to think about, is when you hear like, well, solar or wind might not work during this, it's actually the reverse. Natural gas doesn't work as well in extreme weather events. Clean energy performed as expected in some of the most terrible times for a lot of those folks in Texas. Eileen, this is, I think, directed towards you. Another question is, are there any offshore wind projects that are supported by Wall Street investors? So this is a question of funding and how they get that. So
I don't know specifically about Wall Street investors. I'm not sure what a Wall Street investor is in the first place. Sorry.
I think
but I do know,
like funds, like equitable funds or equity funds, that kind of thing. So yeah.
I don't know. But I will point out that there are a number of oil companies like Shell and BP that are part or whole owners of offshore wind projects. So they do see this as a new frontier industry. As their industries are dying back, they're seeing this as a new opportunity. There's a lot of parallels with the industries as far as the mechanics of rigs and offshore wind turbines and working in marine environments. And so there's a lot of parallels there, and they are transitioning to that industry. So I'll have to get back to you as far as the Wall Street investors are concerned, but, yeah, I mean, I pointed out that there was 8,000 parts in a wind turbine and a lot of really, really large parts. So there's a lot of opportunities for investment. So, yeah, and just the investment dollars are really huge, as being pointed out by the Biden administration. I think it was like 180 billion or something like that.
Great. And I see that you answered the question about breaking blades. We just haven't heard of anything that being a problem.
Yeah. I mean, I get questions, and I haven't gotten a sufficient answer about the recycling of turbines, of what happens when they're, age out. I haven't gotten a solid answer on that, and I will try to get one and get back to you all on that. There is the technology is also evolving as far as because, like I said, we are building in a fixed turbine, a monopile pounded into the ocean floor, because we have that shallow continental shelf, and we are far enough north that we don't have to consider technologically the impact of hurricanes hitting these wind turbines. There has been some discussion and some research into these twisted jackets, which is like a tripod that has three things going into three base foundations going into the water, and those will be likely things that will need to be put up if we start developing offshore wind in southern states and off the Gulf Coast as well, just to get them tighter into the ground. They do have the capacity to tether and switch off, if you will, the turbine blades up when storms come through. And like I said, this is a proven industry in Europe, and they see a lot of big, really harsh environments, and they have been able to work with that. I mean, the technology is all over the place. There's technology to try to mitigate the impact of birds and bats, and with sound, with light, and that kind of thing. So lots and lots and lots of study going on right now to try to make these as efficient and as mitigate all the impacts of offshore wind. A lot of science. A lot of engineers going to be employed on this.
And speaking of technology, someone asked what the state of battery storage is right now. And, again, a quick answer is that we've actually come a long way. There's still some place to go. And one of the things that's exciting about clean energy is the innovation potential. You were mentioning the recycling a second ago, Eileen. I think it's important to note that these problems exist with fossil fuel projects too, in terms of like recycling certain parts. How do we, make sure that we're using this in a way that is maximizing the full effectiveness of each part of these. But, in the state of battery storage, it's also one of those things that's just emerging and growing and maturing. But I don't know if you have a specific answer on like what's a pulse of battery storage right now.
Well, I assume they're talking about solar battery storage. I mean, I don't know. I'm not that versed in what the status of it is, but the technology is there. It's not new technologies. Energy storage is not new technology, but that is one of the things that comes along with, and then you can have your own storage yourself. So it depends on what storage they're talking about, commercial, the grid. The grid is probably presenting some issues because storage is to make sure that you don't go without electricity, especially in adverse go without energy rather, without doing adverse weather. So that storage goes hand in hand with solars, especially with the grid. But there is a backup on grid and all other interconnections. But I think the technology is there, but specifically what the challenges are, I don't know specifically, but that technology is there. And it depends on what you're talking about, the grid storage, at what scale you're talking about storage.
I think this is another question for Eileen. And I'm thinking it's like how is the process of, it's phrased as how is offshore wind generation integrated into the US power grid? So I'm guessing that's a question of like, how does it go from offshore into our homes?
Great big, I love explaining this to little kids when we table and stuff. It's just a big giant electrical cord. It is a cable that comes down through the turbine and it goes underground. They do need to explore making sure, because off the coast of Virginia, we have a lot of unexploded ordnance out there. So they drill down a little bit, not a lot, and they go to shore. They bring it on shore. There is a feeder station on there for the Dominion project. It's located there at Camp Pendleton. And from there, they need to go above ground. In most cases, they're going above ground. There are some instances where they're going below ground, but they do need to get it back to their major substations. Dominion is bringing it, the Dominion on the CVOW project, eventually to Fentress in Chesapeake. The Fentress is already an existent station, but it needs to be built up, and there needs to be a substation and Harper's Road in Virginia Beach. But they are bringing that transmission to Fentress, and then from there it goes onto the grid, goes onto the PJM grid, and it's getting into the whole entire PJM grid. Offshore wind and most renewables, or all renewables, go first in line. So it's as soon as it goes on the grid, it goes into homes and businesses. It's first in line.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to ask one more question because we want to be respectful of everybody's time. But I am putting my email in the chat. If you have any other questions that we couldn't get to just because of the timing, feel free to send me an email, and I'd be happy to get back to you from this. And we do appreciate everyone. So another question that we have, and I think is an interesting one, is it possible to use old offshore drilling rigs essentially to support offshore wind, or maybe to build offshore wind off of them? I'm not exactly sure the way it was phrased, but I think, is there any connection between those two things? I mean, we've already done the harm over there. They're already drilled in the ground. Is it possible to use those as a potential to support offshore wind or build on for offshore wind?
Well, luckily, we do not have any oil rigs off our coast in the Atlantic coast. There's been no drilling. Never will be, as long as I'm alive. No drilling off the Atlantic coast. However, there is, a number of oil rigs off the coast in the Gulf, especially. They leave them in place because they turn into really great fish habitat. There's a lot of provides structure on the seafloor that it's very attractive to fishermen, and so they leave them behind, those rigs. You can't, I mean, I think the industry is, like I said before, the maritime industry, the dealing with large structures is very crossover, which is, I think, why the oil industry is getting into offshore wind, because there's a lot of parallels. And and their industry is luckily drying up.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. Sorry we can get to all the questions. There are good questions. tim.sawinski@sierraclub.org. If you have any more or just like to make a comment, we're happy to do this. This meeting was recorded. We are going to send a copy of the stream to everyone who registered, as well as post on our chapter YouTube and put some stuff up on our social media. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. We know everyone lives busy lives, but this is important things that we're talking about. And ultimately, what we hope this gave you was a bunch of compelling evidence to know that, like, saving the world and making a more just Virginia is not a question predicated on possibility. It is a matter of policy and political will. There's more to be explored with this, and particularly the economic side of these things, how the fossil fuel economy is detrimental to our futures and to our communities right now, and how the clean energy economy, transitioning to that, can have dividends beyond what we can even think of right now. That's what we're going to be talking about the next Turnabout Burn webinar next month. Please register for it. Tell your friends. It's going to be around the same time. It's going to be a good discussion. Thank you very much for attending. We appreciate all of you. And thank you very much to Lynn and Eileen for just sharing their wonderful insight with us. We hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.